Hi everybody. Today we're going to be doing another one of these grammar worksheet videos. Today we're talking about the dative case. That would be dative case used with indefinite and definite articles, used with indirect objects, and used with objects of dative verbs and objects of dative prepositions. So we have quite a bit to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to talk about is the der words, words that mean the, also known as definite articles. We've already covered them in the nominative and accusative cases. They are basically the same for both cases, except the accusative form, of course, takes den instead of der for the accusative masculine. So, we have generally these forms here, der, die, das, die, den, die, das, die. And as you remember before, we had R-E-S-E, N-E-S-E. That would be the resse, nesse. In the dative case, we finally get to the part where we say mermen, M-R-M-N. That would be dem, der, dem, den. Now, a couple of things to talk about. First of all, we have masculine takes an M now for the dative case, so it's dem Mann. Also, we have der Frau now, which confuses all kinds of people because that's also the masculine nominative word. It's the same word, but in a different case and gender. Dem is also the neuter one, which means that things are slightly easier in this case because we now have dem and dame for the neuter and masculine, which is why a lot of teachers will put masculine and neuter next to each other and the feminine and the plural next to each other, is because, as you can see in the first two cases, feminine and plural are very similar, and when you get to the genitive case, they're still pretty similar, and the masculine and neuter would be similar in the bottom two cases as well. But for my classes, I always put them in this order because that's the way that I learned them, not that it's any better or worse than the other form. And you'll also notice that we have den here for the plural form, and that is den as in the same form that we had for the masculine accusative, which is again confusing, but you'll notice that we have here the plural dative as opposed to the other one. And also something else weird that happens, we have that in parentheses there, and that's to show you that at the end of the noun in the dative plural, we have an in as well. So instead of saying den Kinder, like the children, we're going to add an extra in to the end of it to indicate that it's plural dative. So we would have den Kindern. You're going to like to highlight the endings here, R-E-S-E, N-E-S-E, M-R-M-N, and those end up being our mnemonic device of resse, nesse, mermen, surser. We don't get surser for quite some time yet, but I do have a video up for that if you want to see that. So we have R-E-S-E, N-E-S-E, M-R-M-N. Resse, nesse, mermen. Now the ein words are similar but not quite the same. In the nominative and accusative cases, we've already covered them. Ein, eine, and either keine, meine, deine, seine, ihre, unsere, some kind of possessive thing, something like that. So I put that K in parentheses there to tell you that you can't say a books, but you can say no books, you can say my books, and so on, and they take the same endings for the ein words. Also, they're categorized as ein words as well. The accusative case we've also already covered, and that is einen being the only thing that's different here. Everything else stays the same. In the dative case, it's exactly what you would expect it to be. We have M-R-M-N. Einem, einer, einem, keinen. And again, you're going to take an in at the end of that noun whenever you're using that in the dative plural. Now that we know the general overview of how that works, now we have to figure out what exactly do we use this case for. Well, the first thing that we're going to talk about is indirect objects. So these are the receiver of the direct object. So if I buy something, then that something is our direct object. That's the accusative case. If I buy something for someone, that for someone there is usually in a prepositional phrase in English. So I'm buying a suit for my brother. That would be for my brother, which is a prepositional phrase. If we say, however, I am buying my brother a suit, my brother there is the indirect object, and that's what we're going to be working with today. So first thing on here is a list of little sentences we're supposed to put together, and it does say to pay attention to punctuation, as the punctuation tells you what kind of sentence we're making here. So for instance, the first two here end in question marks, which means that we have to make here questions. First thing on here is geben. Geben is an irregular verb, so it takes gibt for the form that we need for seine Schwester. So gibt seine Schwester is his sister giving. And then we have my father a pullover. And we have to decide what is being given and who is receiving that object. So what is being given in this sentence is ein Pulli, which is a pullover or a sweater. Mein Vater is the one receiving that, which makes him the indirect object and therefore the dative case. So we have here, gibt seine Schwester meinem Vater einen Pulli. Is his sister giving my father a pullover or sweater? Now, as you can see, we have here an E for the end of seine, because that one's a feminine noun in the nominative case, because it's the subject. The accusative object here is the thing being given, which is a pullover or a sweater. So we have an EN there for the end of it because it's a masculine noun in the accusative case. And then we have the indirect object, which is my father, meinem Vater, has an M at the end of the ein word because, again, we're using this in the dative case for the masculine form. You'll notice that the word order we used here is verb, subject, indirect object, direct object. Generally speaking, you're going to have the indirect object before the direct object. Now, if you're using this in a statement, you're going to have subject, verb, then your indirect object. But if you're using it in the word order that we're using here for a question, you have your verb first, followed by your subject, then your indirect object. At any rate, you should always have your indirect object before your direct object. Now that changes once you get to some pronouns and stuff, but we don't learn pronouns in this video, so we're going to ignore that for right now, although I do have a video for that as well if you want to see that one. Nummer 2. Here we have another question, so we're going to have to start with our verb again, which in this case is kaufen. I'm going to choose that mein Freund is the subject, so not for any good reason, but we're going to say mein Freund as the subject. That makes it kauft as the conjugation of the verb, so kauft mein Freund. And then what is being bought in this sentence is eine Karte, a card or a ticket. And then his brother is the one that's receiving the ticket, which means that he's in the dative case. So we have a sentence here that says, kauft mein Freund seinem Bruder eine Karte? Is my friend buying his brother a ticket? Again, you'll notice that we have verb, subject, indirect object, direct object. Indirect object is the one receiving the direct object, that's eine Karte, or a ticket or card. And then seinem Bruder is the one that's receiving that card, and therefore the indirect object, that's the dative case. The reason we call these indirect objects is because you can't have one all by itself, although we'll get to some examples of when you have some fuzziness with that. But for right now, in these sentences here, we have subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, not in that order, but those are the order that you need them. You have to have a subject in a sentence. You can't really get away with having one not in a sentence unless it's a command, and then it's just implied. If you were saying, like, I am going, if you just say going, people are like, who? What? Huh? I don't understand. Anyway, so you have to have a subject of a sentence. If you don't have one of those, you don't really have a sentence, you have a fragment. The next thing that you might need, you don't always need one, so sometimes you'll have like, I am a boy. A boy is there the predicate nominative as opposed to being a direct object, but a direct object is the second most needed part of a sentence. So we have here eine Karte, the thing being bought. If you took out meinem Bruder or seinem Bruder, you would be perfectly fine. You would just say, kauft mein Freund eine Karte, is my friend buying a card or a ticket. Makes perfect sense without it. But if you put that in there, it adds a little bit of information that we might need, and that's for whom or to whom something is being bought or given. In the next one, we have an exclamation mark at the end of it, which indicates that we need here a command form. So we need a do form command that goes with schicken, which is just conjugate your verb and drop the dust or the do and the st out of the sentence. So we end up with schick, S-C-H-I-C-K, schick. Then we want to say what is being sent and to whom it is being sent. Einen Brief is the thing being sent, that's the direct object, and therefore the person who is receiving it is der Lehrer, which is the indirect object, which means that it changes to dem Lehrer. Schick dem Lehrer einen Brief. Send the teacher a letter. Einen Brief is the accusative case because it's the thing being sent. Dem Lehrer is the one receiving that letter and therefore is the dative case. In the next one we need a statement. Here we have schenken. Schenken is to give as a gift. And so we have here Tanya being our subject, schenkt, and then what is being given as a gift? That would be eine Bluse, a blouse, and then to whom it is being given, ihrer Freundin. So our full sentence is Tanya schenkt ihrer Freundin eine Bluse. Tanya is giving her friend a blouse. Eine Bluse is the accusative case because it's the thing being given. If you take out ihre Freundin, it makes perfect sense without it. Tanya is giving a blouse. We don't know to whom without having ihrer Freundin in there, but it would make sense without it. Nummer 5. Here we have another statement, and we have a period at the end of the sentence, which is how we know that. And we also have a modal auxiliary, möchten, and then we also have geben. So we want to say the teacher would like to give the students homework. Homework is the thing being given in the sentence and therefore is accusative. The students are the ones that are in the dative case, and so we have here Die Lehrerin möchte ihren Schülern Hausaufgaben geben. The teacher would like to give her students homework. You'll notice here that we have the plural form of Schüler because we have an E at the end of the ein word to begin with, ihre. And since it's dative, we have to have an N here at the end of the ein word and an N at the end of the noun. So we have ihren Schülern. The teacher would like to give her students homework. Die Lehrerin möchte ihren Schülern Hausaufgaben geben. Just as we had with the accusative case, there are certain prepositions that are going to require the dative case. So we have here aus, außer, bei, mit, nach, seit, von, and zu. There is, of course, gegenüber as well, but I'm ignoring that one for this video because gegenüber is kind of funny sometimes. Also, it's not in the textbook that I use. At any rate, it would probably do us a little bit of good if we figured out what these words mean before we try and use them in sentences. So, first one on here is aus. Aus means either out of or from. I say out of or from because there's also the word von, which we already know also means from, and that's kind of confusing. Aus means that if something was inside of something before and now it is no longer in there, that would mean that it came out of something it's from. Which is why you can't say something like, Ich bekomme einen Brief aus meiner Mutter. I'm getting a letter out of my mother. That's like you stuck your hand inside of her belly and pulled out a letter. That's kind of weird and disgusting and awful in all kinds of ways, and so please don't do that. Use the word von if you're receiving a letter from someone, because it's not inside of them, then you took it out of them. You're getting it from them. So, if you are ever in doubt and you want to say either aus or von and you're not real sure which one you want to use, think of it as, is it coming out of something or is it just coming from that general direction? So that's the difference. The next one is by, which is at, near, or with. It's kind of confusing, but if you use it as at, it kind of makes most sense. So by and then your friend, so by your friend's house, that would be at your friend's house. Or you can say near, so you want to put something by something else, that would be near it. Or sometimes it's used as with, but that's kind of weird too. So by is usually the one that gets confused the most because you try and use mit instead. Nach is used as after or towards. If you're saying nach dem Film, after the film, that would be after. If you're going towards something, you're probably talking about anything that is a city or larger. So nach Chicago, nach London, nach wherever it is. That would be used as towards. Don't forget that you also use this one with nach Hause, towards home, because you have that nach and zu business that we talked about before. Von also means from, which I talked about the difference between aus and von just a little bit ago, so this one is from whenever it's not coming out of something. Außer is except. A lot of people will try and translate it as except for, but then people get confused and use außer für, which is not a thing. Don't do that. So except is the translation that I use, because if I say except for, then you end up trying to use two prepositions in a row, and it's just wrong, so don't do that. Außer means except. Mit is the one that means with, so mit einer Gabel, with a fork. Seit is since, as in, since you've been gone, I gotta be... I don't even know the words to that, but anyway, so zu is then to, or at. And this one again is used in the opposite direction as nach. Zu is used inside of a city, so zur Post, to the post office, and so on. And it also could be used as at, but only whenever you're talking about at home, so zu Hause. Now we've got some sentences. We're supposed to put these together using some prepositional phrases, and this is just a good word order exercise. The first one here is a period at the end of the sentence, which means that we have to have a statement, which means we start with our subject, which in this case is Barbara. Barbara is the one that's driving with the bicycle, and therefore we have to use that as the subject. The other two here are going to be used as prepositional phrases. So we have Barbara fährt. Don't forget that there's an umlaut over the A in the er, sie, es, and du forms for fahren. So Barbara fährt, and then we want to say Zeit, Ort, Platz, time, manner, place. Since we don't have time, we have manner here, which is with the bicycle. That's how she's getting from point A to point B. Mit is used here for that preposition, and since we have das Fahrrad, we need mit dem Fahrrad. Zu is where she's going, so to the school, zu der Schule. So the full sentence reads out as Barbara fährt mit dem Fahrrad zur Schule. You'll notice that I shortened up zu der to just become zur. First of all, it's easier to say, And it's also one less syllable, so we have zur instead of zu der. Although it's technically correct to use it either way, you'll probably never actually hear anybody say zu der. Most people are just going to say zur. Or if they do say zu der, you'll barely hear that there's der in there at all, and you'll end up hearing zur. So it's still just zur. Z-U-R. Zur. There's a couple of other ones that we can do that with, but we'll get those here in a minute. We have a question mark at the end of the next one, which means that we have to have a question. Since we have the word wohin, we're going to start with that, which is to where. And then we want to say the question, to where are we going after the film? Wir is our subject, so we have our conjugated form of gehen that goes with wir, which is gehen. Since we have our verb in the first position here, we have to have our subject directly after that, which would be wir. And then our prepositional phrase, nach dem Film. Wohin gehen wir nach dem Film? Where are we going after the film? Nummer 3. This one's a little bit weird. So this one we want to say, besides a brother, Holger also has a sister. And it's a little bit strange phrasing as far as English is concerned, but in German this makes perfect sense. So I'm just going to hand you this answer. This one says, außer einem Bruder hat Holger noch eine Schwester. Here we started our sentence with a prepositional phrase, außer einem Bruder, besides a brother. Now, whenever I told you the translation earlier of außer, I told you that it meant except, and it does. So you could say except a brother, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in English, so we use the word besides here. Besides a brother, Holger has. Now normally we would have subject, verb, other stuff, which would be direct object, indirect object, and all of that mess. But since we started our sentence with a prepositional phrase, we have to have our conjugated verb hat right before our subject. So the verb always goes in second position in a statement. Außer einem Bruder hat Holger noch eine Schwester. Besides a brother, Holger also has a sister. Noch in this sentence is the also part of that. Eine Schwester is actually our direct object here, which means that it's accusative and feminine, which is why it's eine Schwester, and it's not dative. Nummer 4. This one we have a question again, but we don't have a question word, so we start with our verb, which is kommen. Du is our subject, because du is always the subject. Besides that, the other two are prepositional phrases. So we have here, kommst du. Then we want to say Zeit, Ort, Platz, time, manner, place. But we have Zeit, we don't actually have one of those, time. Ort is the manner in which it is done, which in this case is with your girlfriend, mit deiner Freundin. That has an R at the end of it because it's a feminine noun after a dative preposition. And then we have zur Party, to the party. That one also is a feminine noun, but since it's zu, we have a dative form here, and we just contract that to make it zur instead of zu der. Same thing that we did in the first sentence here. Kommst du mit deiner Freundin zur Party? Are you coming to the party with your girlfriend? Nummer 5. Here we have another question. This one starts with warum. Warum is our question word. Then we have to have our verb directly after that, which in this case is kommen. And we have to conjugate that to go with ihr as our subject. Warum kommt ihr? And then we want to have time, manner, place. Time in this case is so spät, so late. Aus is a dative preposition, so we have aus der Schule. Warum kommt ihr so spät aus der Schule? Why are you coming so late out of school? In other words, why are you leaving school so late? Nummer 6. This one's a command, and we have a do form here, so we have to have the do conjugation minus the st, but since we have a verb that ends in an s at the stem before we conjugated it, we don't lose an extra s, so it's just L-A-S-S, las. Leave your bicycle by the house, or at the house, near the house, adjacent to the house, however you want to translate that. Lass dein Fahrrad bei dem Haus. Now this is one of those that I could have contracted again. I could have said beim Haus, but in this case I wanted to emphasize the house, and so we say bei dem Haus. Now this is one of them you could say beim, B-E-I-M, as opposed to bei dem, but at any rate, that's the way I chose to write it this time. Lass dein Fahrrad bei dem Haus. Leave your bicycle by the house, at the house. Nummer 7. Here we have another statement, so we have to have our subject first, which is ich, because ich is always the subject. Then we have a conjugated form of wohnen that goes with ich, which is wohne, ich wohne, and then time, manner, place. So we have here time first, a year ago, or for a year. I have lived since a year ago here, so we have seit einem Jahr hier. Ich wohne seit einem Jahr hier. I have lived here for a year. This is one of those times when you kind of imply the past tense in German, so this is where it's still going on in the present tense, which means that you use the present tense in German, but in English we say I have lived, which is past tense. But in German we still say ich wohne, present tense, I live since a year ago here. Weird little German thing that they do, although that's part of the wonderful thing about German tenses is if it's still going on in the present tense, use the present tense. In the next one we have another statement, and this time I'm going to say ich is the subject, so we have to conjugate our form of werden here to go with ich, which is ich werde. And then eine Karte, which is the direct object of the sentence, a card or ticket. And then from my cousin, von meiner Cousine, bekommen. Bekommen goes at the end of the sentence because we're using here werden. Werden, of course, being a form of the future tense will in German. Ich werde eine Karte von meiner Cousine bekommen. I will get a ticket or card from my cousin. And there's one more usage for the dative case that we don't have in either English or in the accusative case in German, and that is that we have certain verbs that will take a dative object for no apparent reason at all. It's just dative. I don't know why, there's not any good logic behind it, but here are 6 of them. There are more, but these are the ones that we talk about in my classes, and so that's the ones that I chose for this worksheet. Danken is to thank. So we have danken, to thank, which is why my daughter almost always will mess up the words danken and thank and end up saying thank you, which is not at all correct in either language. You end up having too much Denglish, but at any rate, that's danken, to thank. The next one is glauben, which means to believe, as in, ich glaube, ich kann fliegen. I believe I can fly. Passen means to fit. Gefallen means to please. You can also translate it as to like, but then you're going to have a little bit of a problem whenever you're trying to get the word order to work out, because gefallen is kind of like the word gustar in Spanish. I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, but hey, I don't speak Spanish, so... but anyway, the word is gustar, and if you use that in Spanish, you say me gusta, which me is actually not the original case or the nominative case or whatever it is that you would call it in Spanish, because you would have yo as the nominative form in Spanish. You have me gusta because it's pleasing to me. Same thing happens with gefallen, so you would say es gefällt mir, it pleases me, I like it, but me is going to have to be in the dative case in that sentence. So gefallen is kind of weird. Helfen is to help, and that one is also dative. And then, of course, we have the word stehen, which is to stand. It's also like if something is looking good on you, das steht dir gut, that looks good on you, that would be stehen, and it's in that form. It's not always dative. Sometimes it's just not used with an object at all, as in like, ich stehe hier, I'm standing here. But if it's used with an object, then it's going to be used with a dative object. Now let's practice using these dative verbs. So you know that we're going to have a lot of dative stuff going on in these sentences, so just dative it up. First thing on here is that the trainer is thanking the team after the game. So we start off with der Trainer as our subject, and then we have to conjugate our danken, which is dankt, D-A-N-K-T. And then we have to have die Mannschaft, but die Mannschaft is a feminine noun, and since it's the object of a dative verb, it's the direct object in the sentence, it's what is being thanked, that would be the team, and so we have to use here der Mannschaft. So, der Trainer dankt der Mannschaft nach dem Spiel. The trainer thanks the team after the game. Now, this doesn't make any sense at all if you try and do this in English, because you have the trainer thanks the team. The team would then be the thing being thanked, that would be the thing being verbed, and it should be a direct object. Direct objects then translated as being the accusative case. But because it's the object of a dative verb, we have here the dative case, der Mannschaft. You'll also notice that we have nach dem Spiel, after the game. That would be again usage of that dative preposition nach, and I just wanted to point it out because it's dative. Yay, dative! Nummer 2. Here we have a question, and so we have to have the question word order with the verb first, then our subject, and then the object. So we want to say, do you believe the teacher? Glaubst du, that's your subject and verb. Glaubst du der Lehrerin? Do you believe the teacher? Notice that it's der Lehrerin, even though it's a feminine noun. That's because it's the object of a dative verb. If in English you would say, whom do you believe? That would be the accusative case. You would think, hey, it should be accusative in German. But glauben is a dative verb, so we have to use the dative case here. Nummer 3. Here we have gefallen. Gefallen is weird. So in this sentence we want to say Catherine's work is not pleasing to the teacher at all. In other words, the teacher doesn't like Catherine's work. Catherine apparently did a really poor job at doing whatever it is that Catherine was doing. But our sentence here should be Katrins Arbeit gefällt dem Lehrer gar nicht. Catherine's work is not pleasing to the teacher at all. Arbeit is actually our subject here. It's the thing that is not pleasing to the teacher. Dem Lehrer is then the direct object or the dative object, the object of a dative verb here. That would be dem Lehrer because it's masculine and dative. Gar nicht just tells us not at all. If you were to take out the possessive Katrins and you would just say the, you would say die Arbeit gefällt dem Lehrer gar nicht. The work is not pleasing to the teacher at all. In that case, the die Arbeit is still nominative, so I just wanted to point that out because gefallen is weird. Also notice that we gained an umlaut here in this sentence for the RZS form. You'll notice that in the RZS form and the do form, although you'll probably never actually use the do form. Like, du gefällst mir, you're pleasing to me. In other words, like, I like you a lot. Number 4. Here we have passen. Passen is also a dative verb because that's kind of the point of this exercise. Die Hose is our subject, the pants. Die Hose passt dem Freund sehr gut. Couple of problems here. First of all, Hose is a singular noun, even though in English we say the pants. Passen is a dative verb, and that's to fit, so the pants fit the friend very well. Die Hose passt dem Freund sehr gut. Notice that it's dem Freund because it's masculine and dative. It's dative because it's the object of the verb passen. It is the what that the pants are fitting. Number 5. Here we have a form of a modal auxiliary and a dative verb, so we have to have here then followed by our conjugated form of sollen, soll, then the object here, the dative object, seiner Freundin, and at the end of the sentence we have here helfen, which would be our infinitive form because of sollen. Soll seiner Freundin helfen. Soll seiner Freundin helfen. He should help his girlfriend. Nummer 6. Here we have stehen. Stehen is to stand or to look on someone, so we have der Anzug steht meinem Großvater ganz toll. The suit looks good on my grandfather. Der Anzug is our subject here. The on whom it looks good in English would have to be meinem Großvater in German because we have here the dative case because it's the object of the verb stehen. If you're looking for a mnemonic device to remember the dative prepositions, you've got außer, bei, mit, nach, seit, von, zu, gegenüber, and that seems like a really long list, so you can sing the Danube Waltz and sing außer, bei, mit, nach, seit, von, zu, gegenüber. Sorry, it doesn't really fit in the song. At any rate, if you want to sing that, you can sing that. I've also got some other videos that are about the dative case over here, and if you want to see some of those, click on that, and if you want to see me more often, click on that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Bye now.